Good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar on the 2016 Omaha Barometer. This webinar is presented by the UNL Bureau of Business Research, which is part of the College of Business Administration here at UNL, and is based on a report that the Bureau has developed for the Greater Omaha Chamber. My name is Eric Thompson. I'm the director of the Bureau of Business Research and also an associate professor of economics. We're anxious to go ahead and get to the slides here and begin the presentation, but I just want to tell you a few things before we do that you should keep in mind. First of all, we have a chat window that's open. It's on the right-hand side of your screen just below my picture, and you have an opportunity to chat with any of the other participants in the webinar throughout the webinar, so please take advantage of that. If you would like to do so, ask a question of someone or ask a question to the participants in general. You will have an opportunity also to ask me questions. In the middle at the bottom, there's an area where you can type in questions while the webinar is going, or if you'd prefer to wait to the end after the webinar is, or after my presentation is over, and after that I'm going to be answering any questions that people ask. So at any time, feel free to go ahead and type in a question. There's a few other things I'll let you know about. First of all, we're going to be having 3 polls during the presentation. The presentation should take about 20 minutes. We're going to have 3 poll questions and get your responses to some of the issues that will come up in our presentation about the 2016 barometer, and then see what the participants in the webinar felt about these issues. I should also mention, right in the middle of your screen, there's a small window where you can click on and download the full barometer report. It says Barometer Full Report. You also have the option to go ahead and download the report from the Greater Omaha Chamber website at omahachamber, one word, .org /barometer. So that's another option you have. So with all those particulars behind us, let's go ahead and get going with our presentation about the Omaha Barometer, a benchmarking exercise for the Omaha metropolitan area economy. Let me start by just briefly talking about the design of the barometer. So it's really designed to line up with economic theory about metropolitan area growth. And that theory says that there are 2 sources of growth in a metropolitan area economy, or a state economy for that matter. Growth is a function, first of all, of growth in key economic resources such as human capital, machines and structures, business capital, also of entrepreneurship in a region, and also public infrastructure. So growth in all of those resources can key overall job and wage growth in a metropolitan area economy. The other key factor is comparative advantage. So does a metropolitan area have an advantage in terms of cost competitiveness, in terms of quality of life that'll help it attract and retain workers, in terms of innovation? These comparative advantages are quite critical in growth as well. So when we design the 8 indexes of our barometer for Omaha, the first index is to simply measure economic growth or recent economic growth, but the 7 other indexes look at specific economic resources. Have they grown or have they been strong over the last few years? And also comparative advantage. Does Omaha have cost advantages, etc., over its comparison metropolitan areas? Let me also, before we get to the identity of those comparison metropolitan areas, let me go ahead and tell you a little bit about the time frame we're going to analyze. We of course wanted to focus on very recent years to see where the Omaha economy is right now, what its recent growth has been. However, we didn't want to just focus on the last year. We wanted to look at several years of data. Anyone who's spent time looking at data knows that it can bounce around a little bit from year to year. So we thought it was useful to have data for several recent years in order to get the true underlying trends. So typically we average data from the 2012 to 2015 period, or analyze growth from 2012 to 2015. In a few of our individual indicators, we may not have had 2015 data yet, but this is our basic approach. Now, here you can see a little bit more detail about the specific indexes. Again, one index is to look at recent economic growth in the Omaha metropolitan area from 2012 to 2015, but we also have these 7 individual indexes which are related to economic resources or comparative advantage. So human capital, entrepreneurship, infrastructure, private capital, those are all measures of economic resources. Innovation, cost of doing business, quality of life, those are measures of comparative advantage, and we'll be going in detail over each one of those. Let me also show you the comparison metropolitan areas we're going to look at. And before I talk about that, I want to mention that our first poll question is already open. And that question is, where do you think Omaha will place among this group of successful metropolitan areas? So indeed, we do compare Omaha to 9 specific metropolitan areas. Like Omaha, they're all successful, growing metropolitan areas. And each of them, in their own way, has something very in common with Omaha or represent the type of metropolitan area Omaha would like to grow into. So let's look at them. There's 3 groups. The first are the competitors. So these are metropolitan areas located relatively nearby that Omaha frequently competes with for economic development projects. So this group includes Des Moines, Iowa, Kansas City, Missouri, and Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. We also have a group of peer metropolitan areas that are located somewhere within the middle part of the country. We sort of avoided the coasts with our peer metropolitan areas, but that are have some things in common, make good peers with the Omaha metropolitan area. So if you look on that list, Louisville and Salt Lake City. Well, like Omaha, those are kind of the economic center of their state's economy. They're both very successful in the transportation industry. They're both very successful in the healthcare industry, finance, have some success in technology, are really the strong economic engines of their state. So good peers to compare with Omaha. We also have Colorado Springs. Colorado Springs is strong in terms of its connection to the military, its defense contractor industry. Of course, that's a key aspect of the Omaha area economy as well. So we felt that that was also an excellent peer for comparison purposes. The last 3 that we have are what I would call more aspirational metropolitan areas. These may represent where Omaha is headed. 2 of those, Austin and Raleigh, are 2 of the more technically oriented, rapidly growing mid-sized metropolitan areas in the United States. The 3rd is Nashville, which is just a very rapidly growing, diverse economy. So these represent where Omaha may be headed, and certainly we want to benchmark Omaha not just against peers and competitors, but against these metropolitan areas in order to get maximum insight about where Omaha is very strong and where Omaha needs to make additional progress. So with that said, I'll go ahead and give you some initial results, or summarize what we found in the barometer. Before I do that, though, I want to look at the results of our poll question. So the question asks, where do you think Omaha will place among this group of successful metropolitan areas? Well, we had about 13% of respondents say Omaha would be in the top 3rd, and we had 88% of respondents indicate they felt Omaha would be 4th through 6th. And that group was very, very prescient because Omaha was pretty much in the middle of this group of 10 successful metropolitan areas. So let me give you some details. Before I get into some of the individual results, I wanted to give you the bottom line for what we found in the 2016 Omaha Barometer. And what you can see is that Omaha has a very solid, diverse economy. So when you look at those 8 indexes and some of the individual indicators that go into each one of those indexes, we'll talk about them in a little bit more detail in a moment. But you can see that Omaha is solid. It may not be leading the pack, but at least it's in the middle of the pack in nearly all of these indicators. From airport employments to National Institute of Health grants, Omaha does pretty well. from having a competitive cost of living to a solid concentration of knowledge workers. Omaha does pretty well. Omaha is excellent in terms of labor force participation among its workforce and proprietor income. So in this wide variety of topics, Omaha always has at least a solid score, even when compared to these 9 other successful metropolitan areas. I believe this shows the diversity and capacity of the Omaha economy. In some ways, this is Omaha's greatest strength. Now, if you look at the overall ranking, you'll see that the participants in this webinar did a real good job teasing out where Omaha would fall. Omaha ranks 5th out of 10 in the 2016 Omaha Barometer, just as many of you expected. About the same as last year, by the way. What are Omaha's areas of strength and weakness? Again, we'll give you a little bit more detail about this in a moment, but just to summarize, Omaha is strong in terms of business costs, competitive business costs, quality of life, private capital, so machinery, equipment, structures per worker, basic human capital. I'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by basic human capital in a moment, and entrepreneurship. Areas where Omaha lags or has a bit of room for improvement are innovation, advanced human capital, information technology, and then I think with those 3 things, patent activity goes along as well. So let me give you a little bit more detail behind these findings. So we're going to go, again, if you remember those 8 indexes I talked about at the beginning, growth, and then 7 indexes related to economic resources or comparative advantage. We're going to go over those one by one here so you can get some more specific results. Obviously, this is all in the report as well. So first was recent economic growth. So job growth, wage growth, 2012 to 2015, and then the unemployment rate in 2015. The result was Omaha ranked 5th in the 2016 Omaha Barometer, 5th out of this group of 10 successful metropolitan areas, and that was actually a significant improvement from last year's barometer where Omaha ranked 7th. Why did Omaha move up? Because there was strong growth in private wages per job. So the earnings of the average Omaha worker in the private sector grew pretty strongly in 2015. This allowed Omaha to move up. More generally, if you take a long-term perspective, Omaha tends to be strong in terms of having a low unemployment rate. I think that's well known, but also strong in terms of growth in private wages per job. And perhaps that's more of a surprise to people. So the economic opportunity that's being created in the Omaha area seems to be benefiting workers, especially in these recent years. Omaha does, and I should put lag in quotes, lag in employment growth. Omaha's actually had pretty strong employment growth between 2012 and 2015. But in comparison to these 9 other highly successful metropolitan areas, Omaha, by a whisker, came in 10th place out of 10. Let's talk about now some of these individual indexes. Start with human capital. So we have 4 measures in our human capital index. Education attainment, and we look at high school attainment, the share of the adult population that's at least completed high school, and we have college attainment, the share of the adult population that's completed college. We also have the labor force participation rate. That's actually very critical. Whenever anyone is working, they're gaining skill on the job. And so a metropolitan area like Omaha that has a high labor force participation rate has a workforce that's constantly improving and gaining skill relative to other parts of the country where fewer people are actively engaged in the labor market in any particular year. Obviously, knowledge workers are also a key measure of skill. What share of your workers work in occupations that are knowledge intensive? Omaha ranks 6th out of 10 in the 2016 Omaha Barometer. That's the same as last year. Omaha is quite strong in basic human capital. Omaha has one of the highest percentages of its adult population that has at least completed high school, and one of the highest percentages of any metropolitan area in terms of labor force participation rate. And if I included the statistics for multiple job holding, Omaha would be quite strong as well. So Omaha, people in Omaha, workers in Omaha have that basic education, and they've been working. They've got good resumes. They've been learning on the job as well. So I think that's a big positive for Omaha's economy. Where Omaha might lag a little bit is in terms of advanced human capital. We have a lot of people in the Omaha area that have completed college, but if you compare Omaha to these 9 other highly successful metropolitan areas, it lags somewhat in terms of college attainment. Perhaps not surprising also in the percentage of the economy that of workers that are involved in highly knowledge-intense occupations. Again, we got a lot of people in Omaha who are, but the percentages are a bit lower than these comparison metropolitan areas. So kind of a split decision when it comes to human capital. Oh, by the way, our second poll question is now open. We'll be talking about the Entrepreneurship Index shortly. What do you think will be Omaha's greatest strengths in terms of entrepreneurship? Will it be the rate of firm births? Will it be strength in leisure services and business services? Or will the strength be that Omaha has high income entrepreneurs? Or will it be all of the above? So as I continue to talk over the next few minutes, we're going to talk about innovation next. After that, we'll talk about entrepreneurship. So in the meantime, go ahead and cast your vote. What will be Omaha's greatest strength in terms of entrepreneurship? Okay, moving away from that for a moment to innovation. We had multiple measures of innovation, the percentage of Omaha workers who have jobs in the information technology industry, obviously one of our highly innovative industries. Another highly innovative industry is the biomedical industry. So we also have another indicator for the National Institute of Health grants received in a metropolitan area, and this can include universities and also businesses. So the per worker, what's the value of National Institute of Health grants received? That's an indicator of strength in the biomedical industry. We also have patents, just the overall level of patent activity per worker, or per capita, excuse me. And then we have the number of graduates from college, graduates in the sciences, especially from graduate school in any given year. This is actually a key indicator of the level of research activity in a metropolitan area. All universities will have faculty, but it's only the most research-oriented universities that have a large number of graduate students, which makes this a strong indicator of research and cutting-edge research activity. Okay, so what did we find? Omaha ranked 6th in terms of innovation. Again, the same as last year's Omaha Barometer report. Omaha is especially strong in National Institute of Health awards per worker. I think that's related to the 2 medical schools located in Omaha, which is fairly unusual for a city Omaha's size. That's a big positive. Obviously, there's been biomedical businesses that have spun off from that as well. So we do quite well in terms of NIH awards. Omaha lags, however, in patents per capita. Okay, let's go ahead and see what the results were in terms of entrepreneurship. So what would be Omaha's greatest strengths? Well, the most popular answers were Omaha would have a higher rate of firm births and a higher rate of entrepreneurs per person. And the second most popular answer was Omaha would have high income entrepreneurs. And a number of people also mentioned all of the above. Actually, the finding was that Omaha was very strong in terms of the income of its entrepreneurs. So if we look at entrepreneurship, we looked at these different measures. We looked at the share of proprietors, so what share of Omaha individuals were involved in entrepreneurship and running a business, versus being wage and salary workers. We looked at the income of those proprietors. Were they high or low income? And then we looked at the concentration of jobs in the business services sector, which is a very entrepreneurial part of the economy. Omaha ranked 4th in entrepreneurship, again the same as last year. Omaha was very strong in terms of the income per non-farm proprietor. So not only were our workers in Omaha seeing their wages go up, but our proprietors also have higher incomes. Omaha actually lags somewhat in the number of non-farm proprietors per person. Again, we have a high level of non-farm proprietors per worker. We have a lot of business starts every year, but compared to these 9 highly successful metropolitan areas, we lagged somewhat. Actually, the third poll question is now open. What do you think will be the source of Omaha's advantage in terms of the cost of doing business? So We'll be looking at the cost of doing business in a moment here. Do you think Omaha will have an advantage in terms of its wage levels? This is again from business's perspective. Will the cost of space be an advantage for the Omaha area, the cost of energy, or all of the above? So as I continue to present, please provide your answer to that question. Before we talk about the cost of doing business, we're going to talk about our infrastructure index. We look at the miles of interstate highway, a measure of our highway infrastructure. Air passenger employments. Employments tend to be highly correlated with the number of direct flights, so it gives us an idea of the air service available in the metro area. And then private transportation services. So what is the local base of transportation services that can often offer advantages to businesses operating within the metropolitan area? So we found that Omaha is ranked 5th among the 10 highly successful metropolitan areas. Again, that was the same as last year. Now, you might have expected Omaha to do a little better. We're served by 2 interstate highways. We have a very active airport. Certainly, we have some of the leading rail and trucking firms in the country, and so you would have expected transportation services to be a big part of the economy. All of those things are true. Omaha does have a very strong transportation infrastructure. However, some of our comparison areas are also very strong in terms of transportation. Salt Lake City is a hub, I believe, for Delta Airlines. Nashville is served by multiple highways, has a very large airport. Kansas City is strong in trucking and rail, just like Omaha. And then Louisville is actually the air hub for UPS. So among our competitors and peers, there's a lot of areas that are strong in transportation, which explains why Omaha came in 5th. Okay, let's go ahead and see about cost of doing business. We measured 3 things: hourly wages, space rental rates, and industrial energy rates. We found that Omaha ranks 2nd among the 10 highly successful metropolitan areas. That's an improvement up from 3rd last year. The reason for Omaha's success is it's strong in all 3 measures. If you look at the 3 of them, Omaha is 10% below the national average, between 10 and 13% below the national average in all 3. So much more competitive in terms of the cost of doing business than some of the other metropolitan areas we compared Omaha with. I can see that you all did real well on this one again, with more than half choosing all of the above, that Omaha would have an advantage both in wages, and by the way, we compared similar occupations. So among the same group of occupations, Omaha had somewhat lower wages, lower space rental rates, and lower industrial energy rates. Moving on to the quality of life. Now, the quality of life, that's kind of in the eye of the beholder, means different things to different people. So we have a broad group of quality of life measures to try to capture more what's important to most people. At least there'll be some of these individual measures will be important for most people. We look at the cost of living. We look at commute times. So that's sort of the cost of living in terms of time. Is Omaha an easy city to get around? Healthcare access, violent crime, obviously you want less of that. Air quality, which metropolitan areas have the best air quality? Arts and cultural opportunities. Actually, you'll see that's an area where Omaha does very well. And then natural amenities. Are there natural recreation amenities nearby, access to water, etc.? And then, of course, just good old climate. Is it cold in the winter and warm in the summer? So Omaha actually, again, did very well, ranked 2nd in this year's barometer. And that's a bit of an improvement from last year in terms of quality of life. Omaha is strong in cost of living, ease of travel, arts and cultural opportunities, and healthcare access. Omaha does lag a little bit in natural amenities. So obviously we know we have cold winters but hot summers. So climate is not a big positive compared to some of these other metropolitan areas. But Omaha does much better in what I'd call person-made amenities, and therefore our overall quality of life ranking is pretty good, or quite good. Let's go to our last index, and by the way, this is a new index this year, private capital. So we've tried to look at what is the value of equipment, or you might say machinery and equipment per job. What is the value of the structures, the buildings, per worker? and what is the value of intellectual property products such as software per worker in the businesses in Omaha across the board, the Omaha private sector. And obviously the idea here is to see, is Omaha a place with capital intensive production or less capital intensive production? Obviously there's advantages to growth to capital intensive production. You see Omaha did quite well, ranked third out of the total 10 metropolitan areas. Omaha is very strong in the value of equipment and machinery per job and in the structures per job. Omaha lags a little bit in terms of intellectual property products per job. In a way, this new index is kind of a microcosm of our overall findings in this report. Omaha is very strong and solid in your basic economic values, but perhaps has a bit more work to do when it comes to innovation, technology, intellectual property, and so forth. So let me just give you the bottom line, part 3 here. Omaha is consistently solid. If you look at those 8 indexes I showed you at the beginning, Omaha falls between 2nd and 6th. So really no bad scores on those individual indexes. Overall, Omaha ranks 5th. It ranks behind all 3 of the aspirational areas, Austin, Nashville, and Raleigh. Obviously, we need to make some improvements in terms of innovation, information technology to catch that group. In terms of the peers, Omaha is behind Salt Lake City, but it's ahead of the 2 other peer metros, Colorado Springs and Louisville. And Omaha leads all of its competitor metropolitan areas, Des Moines, Kansas City, and Oklahoma City. So these were the key findings from our 2016 Omaha Barometer. Again, download the report to get all of the detailed results. We certainly want to thank the Greater Omaha Chamber for giving us the opportunity to develop the barometer report. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn to your questions. I see there was one question asked, and if anyone else would like to ask a question, this would be a good time to go ahead and type it in. Before I go ahead and answer the questions, let me just mention there's lots of ways to connect to the Bureau of Business Research, which again is within the College of Business Administration here at UNL, via LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. You can also subscribe to our e-newsletter by sending your preferred email address to bbr@unl.edu. So the question we received is, what about community colleges? So if you look at our human capital measure, we have a measure of high school attainment, we have a measure of college attainment, but what about community college attainment? So I think that's not in there. I take that as a good suggestion, perhaps another measure that we should add to our human capital index to see if that high school attainment rate is followed up by a similarly high community college attainment rate. I have to confess that I don't know off the top of my head whether our community college attainment rate is also higher. Are there any other questions that anyone would like to ask? We'll give you a moment to type those in. Well, not seeing any additional questions. I guess all I should do is thank each of you for participating in our webinar. I should mention that our webinar series is kind of over for the school year here, but we'll be back with a new webinar series, each month starting in August of this year. So have a great summer, everyone. Look forward to seeing you again in August. And again, thank you for your participation.